So you could say that the shift from the Earth as the center to the sun as the center was a shift of about 1 in 10. So one planet to 9 other planets. Or it's the shift from the individual self egocentrically at the center of awareness to the archetypal levels. So systems of archetypes like astrology or tarot or enneagram or whatever, they're all somewhere in that vicinity of 1 to 7 to 10 to 22, to shift from the individual self to the archetypal self, the self that's one of, a dozen human stories, the self that's what Jung said, we are danced by powers we pretend to understand. So that deep archetypal shift in society is a shift from 1 to the order of 10. But the shift that we're making now is a shift from 1 to 100 billion. There are 100 billion stars in a galaxy. So we're making a shift of 10 to the 10 to the power of 10 order of magnitude greater than the shift of the Renaissance or the Enlightenment. So that's a big deal. Like we all talk about how everything is accelerating, but that acceleration is exponential. And so we're hitting in our civilization this requirement just not to expand our consciousness. In fact, the whole story of getting to a higher level of consciousness is part of the last dispensation of enlightenment. The journey now is how to go beyond consciousness into a direct relationship with what lives at the center. So if what lives at the center now of our cosmology is a black hole at the center of the galaxy, the densest, and also the most mysterious singularity, then metaphysics means that also exists not only at the core of us as an individual, but also at the core of our civilization. So what is a civilization that's based around the principle of the mystery and of singularity? And so that's what's ahead of us as a mass. And so to give you some sense of what that might look like, the accelerated change that's been happening in the world is a decentralization of the individual. So individual being at the center of pursuit of life and love and happiness makes the individual the center of ripple that everybody lives in. And the soul replaces the individual at the center and puts the archetype, and particularly the archetype of love and freedom, at the center. So now the individual personality is not at the center of things, and the tribal ruler is not at the center of things, but consciousness is. The shift that's coming is the shift from history to the mystery. Instead of the long journey of history on the planet through civilization, there is a radical reorganization. And the way that works in the spiritual path is that there is a purification path, which is a long path of probation, which is getting the personal self ready for soul initiation. And then there's the path of soul initiation, which is often tantric. So now consciousness and sexuality has to be integrated, masculine and feminine have to be integrated. All of the archetypes need to be integrated into a functioning whole. And that's the work of individuation and the kind of depth psychology, and soul initiation in the different spiritual traditions. So the individual self has to give away to the realization of the self as soul. And this is like replacing earth-centric spirituality with soul-centric. So now you're a heliocentric being rather than an earth-centric being. And the mystery has been how to become heliocentric without denying the earth or repressing it or separating ourselves off from it. So that's the tantric path, the integration of the sun and the moon, the integration of the great lights. So the path that's ahead of us is a path of a deeper connection to the dark. And the dark here is not in polarity to light. The dark is the origin of light. It's the dark that everything comes from. And in the universe, it's the dark of dark matter and dark energy that the frisky stuff called light and matter dance on top of. So when you take that into metaphysics, now you have to find a deeper principle than the soul a deeper principle and the sun and the moon, the great lights, you have to find the principle of the deep dark, the divine dark. And that comes through as instinct. So you can't get there directly. You actually have to go there through the soul. And going there through the soul means that you have to awaken as soul first. And then when you awaken as soul, there is a capacity to integrate the deep spiritual instinct. So in some traditions, it's talked about as straight knowing. It's what's at the core of the soul, just as the black hole is at the core of the sun's orbit. So there is also something in metaphysics called the monad, which is at the center of the orbit of the soul. So this relationship between soul and monad becomes the new spiritual pathway. And instead of initiation, which is the expansion of consciousness, the word for it is identification. You need to learn to identify with the principle that truly is at the center of things. In the same way that we used to think that the earth was at the center, and then we discovered that not only was the earth not at the center, nor was the sun at the center, that the galaxy, the black hole at the center of the galaxy was the center of our galaxy, but then there are hundreds of millions of galaxies, and the universe actually has no center. It's a expansion from a point in time and space, from something outside time and space. So that doorway to outside time and space, to the eternal, to the infinite, that doorway is at the center of every human soul, and it's at the center of our collective world soul. So that's what's revealing itself. And just as, you know, when we were trying to make the transition from earth-centric to sun-centric, the old ways of doing things don't work. And so now the old ways of doing things are working with consciousness, trying to have consciousness at the center, trying to understand when what we've discovered is our consciousness itself is affecting reality. So how do we have a direct relationship to what is real without distorting it through our consciousness? And this is a direct relationship to the life principle. So as an example, on the planet, you could imagine that the current attempt at resolving civilization is to try to get everybody to agree to a few consciousness principles, which could be like the UN having a code of conduct, which is, you know, basic human values, or a business having a set of values that everybody abides by. So we come up with some principles, and then we try to get everybody's buy-in to those principles, and then we try to implement those principles. So that's our current best option for the way we could try to have global governance, or the way that we could try to have the European Union cooperate, or the way we try to get families or businesses to cooperate, as we try to have consciousness come up with a set of principles and then enroll everybody else's consciousness in those principles. And of course, we end up in many different forms of ideology, many different battles between religions. We end up with all of the political turmoil we've got on the planet. And it's quite obvious, as Einstein says, that you're never going to solve a problem from the same area that it was created. Consciousness itself is not a path out of the problems that consciousness has caused. They can only be solved by the revelation of a deeper principle that orders consciousness in the same way that consciousness orders our body minds. So that's the principle, the bottom line of the metaphysics of transition. It's the replacement of the whole of history, really, since the Enlightenment, of a development of consciousness, with a radical upheaval of the cosmology, of what sits at the center. Because if you have the soul at the center, you end up with consciousness at the center, and all of the consciousness wars that we currently are seeing, where ideologies are conflicting with each other, and different worldviews and different layers of worldview are in a degree of conflict. So to give you just a taste of what it may look like on the other side of the transition. So remember, I said that a shift from 1 to 10 is the shift from planet to star. The shift from 1 to 100 billion, or 10 times to the 10 to the power of 10, is the shift from the level of star to the level of galaxy. So that would be like all human beings, the 8 billion humans on the planet, waking up to the fact that they were being governed at the core of their being by a principle that was revealing itself as life. Now, this is very different from having a conceptual understanding of the one life. This is a direct, radical experience of the one life operating through the core of your being and guiding, and eventually being the first principle, the very first thing that guides you. So you're not guided by the soul. You're not guided by your desires. You're not guided by your ego. You're guided by the one life at the core of humanity. And that one life is not going to be found by ideology, and nor is it going to be found by consciousness raising. It's going to be found by direct relationship with a new principle, this principle that actually lives at the heart of humanity in the same way that the black hole lives at the heart of the galaxy. So the revelation of that principle is what is ahead of us, and it's a radical awakening. The next step of that is that's only part of the awakening. And think of that, the whole of humanity beginning to operate as one being by some mysterious force that lives at their core, rather than a whole lot of different religions and countries and so on, all trying to argue with each other about who's got the best take on reality. That this simultaneously awakening of humanity as a single being of cosmic origin, guided by a principle that is a living current of energy at the core of each being. So that already feels like not only an impossible, but a very radical evolution. That if we shifted, never mind the AI singularity, but if we shifted to that recognition of the one life at the core of every human, not as a philosophy, but as an actual guiding principle that everyone was in connection with. Then the next step is humanity is really only part of the earth. So if you extend, instead of just the 8 billion humans, that all of the life on earth, all of the kingdoms in nature, from stones to angels, from vegetable kingdom to animal kingdom, that every individual being, a seemingly individual being on the planet, began to be guided directly and moved into action directly by the one life of earth. So that then is producing a synthesis that is beyond consciousness. Because the problem you have with consciousness is that, okay, you can awaken humans to the fact that you are part of a biosphere, and that, because you're part of a biosphere, if the biosphere is destroyed, it's going to destroy you. So you should recycle and pay attention to the environment. So that's consciousness trying to order consciousness and drive it according to a deep principle. That is very different than the life moving, because if you have consciousness, you also have free will. And free will means you can decide to go along with these higher values or go against these higher values, or to pay lip service to those higher values and then live some other values yourself. But when the principle of life reveals itself, it's not a question of consciousness. You really only have two options as consciousness. You either resist or surrender. So if you resist, then basically the result is an experience of even more separation and isolation. And if you surrender, the result is expansion and initiation. You begin to know yourself as the very principle of the one life that is moving you. So it doesn't require everybody to agree on how best to serve the one life, which is the big problem with politics, is it needs people to agree. So the life principle doesn't need you to agree. It just needs you to be in touch with it and to move with it, or either move with it or resist it. So as this principle, which is emergent, reveals itself, it's not just going to reveal itself from the outside And of course, many of the ways it's revealing itself from the outside is through crisis, which is forcing us into some kind of action, whether it's climate crisis or religious crisis or war or whatever it is, it's from the outside. But if this principle lives at the core of every human being, and in fact, the core of all life on the planet, it's also revealing itself from the inside. And what that means is mental health, means suicidology, it means nihilism, it means all of those experiences that are happening in the psyche of human beings as that principle is asserting itself, it's emerging. So once again, humans can choose. You don't have a choice whether to agree with it or not, because it's coming ready or not. You do have a choice whether to align with it and surrender to it and allow the life that is trying to move you in the best interests of all life on the planet, allow it to radically alter and change your life and direct it and move it according to that deep principle of what's best for the whole, not conceptually best, but actually best. Or you have an opportunity to resist it. If you resist it, if you use your free will, which you do have, to resist that current of life, then it results in all kinds of metaphysical issues that come from not allowing the life force to move through you. So I think it was Anais Nin, or someone who said, when the pain of being in the bud is greater than the pain of blooming. So humanity is in the process, as we go through this transition, of being bloomed from the inside out, being confronted by crisis from the outside, and that crisis is the consequences of our limited behavior based on a misidentification of who we are. But there is also revelation coming from the inside, and that revelation is who we are. Like at our core, this is the first principles of metaphysics. I would say the most important thing needs to be the most important thing. So what you put at the center of your cosmology is what your world revolves around. And if what you put at the center of the self is your individual survival and your individual desires and your individual pursuit of your own happiness, your own goals, then that's the kind of life that we have collectively. But if what we learn to put at the center is our surrender to the one life that is not only at the core of us, but at the core of all of humanity, at the core of every kingdom in nature, at the core of the earth itself, and at the core of the cosmic powers that spin galaxies, that life, if that becomes the center that we not only conceptually orient to, but we orient through the core of our own hearts and can feel, now we have a radically different civilization. So I guess my contribution to this whole discussion of Earth and transition is that it's not really going to be able to be achieved by consciousness, by coming up with a new set of ideas, a new set of principles, and enrolling everybody in them, and then trying to have some kind of incentivizing of everybody to follow these principles, which are quite clearly in the greater good from the level of consciousness or the person who thought of them. That consciousness itself has reached a deep limitation, and that the civilization that's ahead of us is not going to be based with consciousness at its core. It's going to be based with this principle of life, which is the principle that's related to the divine darkness. It's hidden to us, just like light can't escape from a black hole when it goes into it. Your consciousness can't go into the life principle and discover what's there. The best you can do is recognize that there is a principle beyond your understanding that is capable of operating through you if you allow it, if you give your consent to it. And then that naturally begins to reorder your life. And it reorders the life of humans in a much faster and more accelerated way than consciousness. Because for consciousness to reorder human life, it needs some people to become enlightened, or in other words, have a higher level of gravity of their consciousness, and for them to try to enroll everybody else in raising their level of consciousness. And so you end up with the spiral dynamics or the different memes or the different layers and levels of consciousness, you also end up with, some levels of consciousness, obtaining access to technology of higher levels of consciousness. So you end up with marauding tribes with AK-47s and quite unevolved states having access to nuclear weapons. So you have all of the problems of layering of consciousness when you try to resolve the world's problems through more consciousness. If you have access directly to the life, that life operates through all levels of consciousness at the same time. So in other words, the life is able to move regardless of the level of consciousness that the person is at, is able to move them towards the greater good. All that is required is for each person to give their consent and to be able to be pointed towards how to experience and feel the relationship with that life. And then you have mass change fast, because the change is being guided not by consciousness and enrolling people's will, but by the will of creation itself operating directly through not only humans, but through the biosphere, through all life on Earth simultaneously. So this is, part of my work has been to get people to begin to conceive of this. And of course, the next step after the conceiving of it is to start to try to have direct experience of it. Because once you taste your life being guided by a principle deeper than consciousness, then it becomes like self-fulfilling. And, Rumi says, one kiss and you're ruined forever. That if you actually kiss the life principle and feel it at the core of your being, and feel the incredible thrill that comes from being driven by the mystery and the mystery unfolding itself from the core of your being, that brings you into a spontaneous relationship with life and the people around you that is simply for the greater good, but not for the greater good as you necessarily understand it. So it's not a question of your consciousness deciding what's for the greater good, but life always moves you towards the greater good, often in spite of what you may think to be the best thing for you and for others. So it's kind of like a very high risk process, because you are trusting a mysterious force that is not really revealed to consciousness, but is revealed at the heart of consciousness, at the core of the body and at the core of the heart. So I feel a little bit like somebody who is trying to get people to test out new technology, but it's metaphysical technology. It's a technology of the deep psyche, not the technology of AI. In fact, you could say that AI in some ways is revealing the soul, because it's showing us everything that clever mind can do. And so what is it that makes up a human being that is of a different order than AI? And that's the revelation of the soul. And deeper of the soul is the revelation of the singularity of the monad. So a lot of my work in education is to point people towards the possibility that there is a principle emerging, not only at the core of human beings, but at the core of life on Earth, that has always been there, just like the black hole has always been at the center of our orbit, even though we weren't aware of it, that there is a principle emerging, and that they can become in relationship with that principle through consent, through a willing consent to be guided by it, and through a series of experiments. And those experiments are allowing the mystery to reveal itself to you, to direct your life for a while and see if it actually works out in such a way that more life is becoming present at the core of your being, more love is coming into your relationships, you are more likely fitted into your best use in the world. All of those are being driven by the mystery. Another way of helping people to come into relationship with that principle is through recognizing the instinct. So as we do the tantric path, which is the realization of sexuality and consciousness as twin sides of the same thing, there is a requirement to release the repression on sexuality so that consciousness and sexuality can integrate themselves and they can come into union. So there's a deeper level of integration between what you would call a spiritual instinct, which is, in religious terms, you might call it the will of God. It's the directing energy that moves all souls towards some greater good that they are not capable of understanding individually. And then that instinct is linked with the primal instinct, which lives in the body, which is the wild instinct, which is bent on self-preservation of each life form on the planet. So when there is a reconciliation of those two instincts, the spiritual instinct that lives at the core of the soul and the survival instinct that lives at the core of the body, now you can operate according to the life principle without any kind of split. That what's in the best interest of your body, and in fact, the greater body of the planet, is also at the best interest of your the spiritual instinct that lives at the core of your soul. So now the split between matter and spirit is overcome by the soul. And how might that, work in our collective world? Then what we would begin to see is the kundalini of Earth. In other words, that deep spiritual instinctive force that makes everything grow and moves everything from the life at the core of the planet up, whether it's the sap in trees or whether it's the life force of mountains, the spiritual life of the earth moving upwards. And at the same time, the spiritual instinct, which you might call the will of God of your religious orientation, is bringing energy down. And so that reconciliation in a human being, allowing the instinctual life of nature, its desire to survive and regenerate itself and renew itself in spite of everything that humans have done to the biosphere, that restoration of the life force of Earth, reactivating the biosphere through its life force and reactivating humans. So in other words, when somebody is in touch with their own kundalini in their own body and with the kundalini of earth, there's a natural vitality and a healing that comes to the body as the life force is strengthened from the body up. At the same time, when the instinct is pouring in from spirit, the soul is invigorated and comes alive with its purpose and begins to supernova its gifts into the world. So at the same time, you have physical vitality emerging from the body, driving up through our sexuality, helping the whole body come alive. You also have spiritual instinct descending through the soul, bringing the courage to express the love and the freedom and the beauty that is inherent in the human soul and create a civilization that's based on the principle of life rather than the principle of survival and the principle of the individual self sitting at the core of things. So this is an exciting time to be alive as I can imagine. I think everybody thinks that they would like to live in exciting times. But I feel like the transition that is ahead for humanity is so radical and so huge that there is nothing that we can conceive of that is going to prepare us for what's ahead. And it's certainly not going to be incremental change that is made by our consciousnesses one by one becoming enlightened. It's more like all of our hearts and our bodies and our souls will become endarkened over a short period of time, maybe decades rather than hundreds of years, so that the kind of civilization that we're going to be in by the time we get to 2050 is going to be as radically different as the one that we're in now, as the one that we're in now is different from life 5,000 years ago. So, and that degree of timing is about the right degree of time. What once took 5,000 years is now going to take a few decades, and those few decades are upon us. So yeah, I think my time is up, but that's a little taste of the metaphysics of transition from this node on the planet and the life force moving through it. And I love the idea that you're in the dark in the cave, um, feeling both the instincts of matter that live down there, the dragons that live in the earth, and also the spiritual download that comes from gathering together in consciousness and praying and meditating and calling in and invoking the civilization that's ahead of us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, thank you. You're also right on time. Thank you so much. Are there any sharings that would love to be made now? And maybe we'll take just a couple of sharings now, because we will be now also heading together toward this encounter with this alignment that's ahead. The solstice is within like 9 minutes.
I have a quick question. And how would, if we live from the place of the life principle and everything is spontaneous, how does that look in relating amongst ourselves as human beings? Are there still contracts in the same way that people get married and like create binding structures between each other, or is everything just a spontaneous play from day to day, no attachments whatsoever?
Yeah, I would say it's a reorientation of first things first. So often in relating worlds, for example, the contracts and the exchange between people are the first things. They create the container, and then in that container, your souls grow, and then maybe your souls eventually contact this life principle. But if you turn that upside down, you start with the life principle, which is the radical being driven by something beyond your awareness. And then you wrap that in soul, which is the loving awareness of the sacred relationship between individuals and between cultures and civilizations. So now the life is wrapped in love. And then the last thing you would do is create forms and structures which would express that life and love over periods of time. So you may still end up in beautiful relationships that have structures that may not look that much different than a monogamous relationship, say. But the very principle at the core is different. It's come from a different place, and all of your structure comes last rather than first. So the radical change in the structures of society means economic and political structures that run everything and are fear-based have to be replaced with structures that are supporting and evolving the human spirit. So in relationships, also in society.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So looks like we're gonna dive all into the solstice alignments, which is also a beautiful way, direct way also to feel into exactly what you shared about the 3 levels of planetary, solar, and black hole or monads. So it will be a non-guided one. Everyone is like really fully diving into his own experience, but we'd love to reopen around like in 30 minutes from now a space for a circle and sharings and harvests.
Yeah.
Brother, thank you very much, and see you on the other side of the beautiful solstice.
All right. Enjoy the cave.
We will.
Bye.
Have a great meditation, everyone. So the space is now open for online or on-site sharings.
Feeling deeply that pain, feeling somehow how all these bodies were lured in to be with her, and also somehow feeling that pull or that suction almost even to go deeper, deeper into the earth, and just letting the body, letting the mind, letting the soul sink deeper, and somehow coming back to this illusion of the world being outside the cave, of 3D being more true than the shadows, and somehow diving through the shadows into a space of being and not being. And just feeling the alignment of the earth, of the sun, of the black hole, feeling us, our bodies, our souls, life, aligning and being held by the earth, and also the earth aligning its body, its soul, the life that goes through. And somehow feeling this cave, holding at the same time the deepest tones and colors and moistness of the womb of the earth, and at the same time the womb having a star ceiling, and even more, and then just
I'm feeling in the burning of it right now, this burning of the old, and yeah, all of these pieces that Bruce has spoken into. Yeah, the personal survival mechanism, the dweller making its appearance in my presence, and feeling all of this archetypal move, and just coming into more consciousness of that, and while being swept up in all of that, just yeah, almost in prayer, just letting that deeper life bubble up with a softening and a trust in that. Just this constant fire of turning between all of these elements, and feeling that throughout the meditation, and yet, yeah, just such an intelligence in the cells of my body as it settles in into, you know, this life. Very grateful for this container, this space, this celebration and alignment.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Gus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, feeling also the alignment and very much the descending energy, like the will of the God, or you could call it black hole life principle coming through from black hole towards the earth, and how it's moving and how it is awakening and also like in darkening people. And it felt like also like they're like cells, like the cells in the heart of which humanity is in the earth, like the cells of that humanity being darkened, and how that actually makes that heart come alive and pump and actually feel what is right, and coming in the right balance, right alignment with the other kingdoms on earth. And then here how this descending energy from the center of the galaxy is coming towards the center of the earth, and how that's actually then ascending from this Magdalene game not so far away into the other direction as this returning black dragon. And also feeling how this temple is landing here. The first pieces. And feeling this piece written by Elowen, this dances in the dark. You say almost sitters in the dark. But it feels very much in this being in the dark, and this gathering. How it is beginning a myth actually somehow. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I feel I've been here has been a kind of complete dissolution of words, images, consciousness, of almost self, but like only the kind of organic and geometric figure of the direction from above to below, and from the heart of that merger, a kind of tentacular weaving, like passing through every single thing, from an atom to a planet, to a human being, to a human heart, to a flower, but not on not through images of them, but like more like a kind of bone marrow or something that is a kind of dark river of life, irrigating everything and allowing everything to be on top of it, but having completely no contact at all with this kind of outer reality that we call reality, but being really sucked into this kind of organic dark medium that is actually the pulse of life at the core of everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it feels we're pretty full here. And words won't be such a medium from now on. Is there any final sharing online or here in the cave?
Silence speaks for itself.
Silence speaks for itself. Oh, I'll really transparently will be sharing something around the program. Is that at the very time of the solstice, Mose was transitioning from one place to another and transportation, so he had to record and not being there with us on Zoom. And what I feel here, and I'm also with co-organizers here, I just feel like I want to eventually dive deeper into the cave. I want to eventually unplug from the Zoom and go into a dream temple and be with you guys, but not through Zoom, but more like in this space where we are one, and eventually then save Mo's gifts for tomorrow evening and have a tremendous cacao dance in the Jardin des Petits Picard.
Yeah.
All
right.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you for your line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Immense love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hey. Mm.